What's up, guys? Back over here on Wednesday with another episode of Shut the Punk Up. Tonight, I have a very awesome guest. We are kind of coming up today. It's 9/11, and man, it's been a long time. I think, 22, 23 years. Maybe, yeah, is it 22, 23 years? I'm losing it. But tonight, I have Diego Rivera, who's with Bring Our Troops Home. Awesome organization that is constantly trying to get legislation passed with Defend the Guard, which a lot of you have heard of. I just recently had Tom Mannion on to discuss this. Diego's an awesome dude. I met him, I think, for the first or second time at the LPNH convention earlier this year. And he's just been an absolute force trying to get this thing passed through the state house across the country. So I'm going to bring him up here. Diego, what's up, dude?
What's going on, my dude?
Not much, man. So I guess I gave you a brief intro, but kind of tell us about yourself and what got you to the point of like being a part of Bring Our Troops Home, like on an official scale.
Sure, yeah. So I got bit by the Ron Paul bug, and then I didn't know what to do, and I floundered for a really long time trying to figure out how to just be more than passionate and burn out. And so I've been an activist for quite a while, and the good news is that I've been paid to do this, so it means I must be doing something right.
Right.
Most aren't. So I consider that a bit of a win, is that I've been able to pay my rent for, I'd say, about a decade doing this stuff. So almost. But I also flailed and did a lot of dumb stuff trying to figure out what to do. But yeah, that job came in for Bring Our Troops Home, and when we initially focused on, if anybody's heard Dan's testimony, which I'm not going to revisit, but initially we got everybody down to D.C. to go talk to Congress, and if only they'd hear us. And then if we just educated these congressmen, they would turn around and go and do the right thing, and that never happened, and wow, what a surprise. So we focused on a decentralization tactic of getting this bill moved forward in a couple states, and I think initially this bill was probably filed in maybe 2 to 3 states, and now just last year I think we were in about 30.
Wow, dude, that's crazy. And I know Dan McKnight is a huge force on that. He's been doing this for quite a long time. You both are veterans, which obviously I think when we're out there talking to other veterans that are liberty-minded, it definitely goes a long way. Like, I don't really talk about my time in the Army, but, like not as much as a lot of other people. But, I think that if you go out there, like when I was running for sheriff, people were saying like, well, what qualifies you? And I was like, well, I see what goes into the, bureaucratic system of like just the military. And I was in the infantry. So, like you kind of, I think you were Ranger Battalion, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So it's like, they're like, what qualifies you? And it's like, man, no one's qualified to do this shit. No one's qualified to roll over you. But, the best thing we can do is, find people who really care about putting that power back into the hands of the people who are actually voting instead of holding it all in one spot. Yeah. And obviously that's kind of like part of the huge message of Defend the Guard is like, they're trying to take that power away from the president and put it back in the hands of the states. 9/11 was the reason really that jump started all of this, right? Like it was pretty much, the two towers fell, and then Congress was just like, well, I guess we're just going to give power to the president to do whatever he wants with the armed forces.
Yeah, dude, everything changed. Like I remember, like barely, but I still remember like the whole like being able to take flights and never having to go through TSA. And there's a little bit of a memory of like what it was like before 9/11 because I was in high school in 9/11. Okay. So I remember pre 9/11 and then after, and everything has changed. We don't. It's like a tale of two cities right now.
Yeah, It really is. And I mean, when it comes to that, like, you know, I was in seventh grade, so I wasn't in high school, but I think we're probably about the same age. I'm about to turn
Yeah,
35 on Friday.
yeah.
Um, but I can definitely say that even from a young age, I was raised in more of like a conservative family, and
Hmm.
I would say that um even to this day, like my parents are big time like hawks for Israel.
Right.
And like they're part of like Christians United for Israel.
Yeah.
All that. And it's pretty crazy like to see how quickly people can get manipulated. And just in case we forgot how easy it is to use this type of weaponized thought process against people, COVID was just a few years ago. But
Hmm.
they kind of, it's not the same, but it's they pretty much used it in the same capacity, propaganda, all that. um but how did 9/11 shape your personal views on US foreign policy? I'm not sure if maybe it happened in high school for you.
Yeah.
I know for me, like it was like pretty quick and immediate. I was like, well, people shouldn't be doing this. And I don't think like, yeah, I think even at a young age, people like have an understanding like why are we fighting everywhere? you know?
Yeah. No. Um. I guess for high school, I just I saw one, I'm a Jersey kid.
Hmm.
Initially, I regret to say that now because that state is so it's so far gone.
Yeah,
But that's where I grew up, and so when all this happened, I'm like, this is the homeland getting attacked, and I think it hits a little bit different than when you're in like living out in California or something like that. You should also every American felt that, so I'm not taking that away from anybody. It
yeah,
was a bad, horrible, tragic day, and so that's where I think you're compelled to do something. You're compelled to there is something. I don't think it's a bad thing that you want to respond and say what I witnessed here is horrible and I want to do something about it. I don't think that that's it. I think it's the manipulation that went into it. And then
absolutely.
after that, that's really the worst part, is because you take probably the purest and most sincere aspect of people that are willing to step aside and do something for a cause greater than what they perceive as themselves. And that's really the worst part about it, is you take one of the purest sentiments and you pervert that to create something so evil and so dark. But I was fully bought in, and then from there, I just was like, you know what, this is what we're gonna do. And then I was just like obsessed. So I didn't even care about high school. I was just like, I just need a pass on my classes so that I can just go in and do what I need to do, because that's all I cared about. And so I was like reading all the stuff, and then I just, in the same way that like Liberty people or they just like tiz them up on the one thing that they care about, and
It's true. Yeah.
that's what I did, but just with that. But and then afterwards, there's the big look in the mirror afterwards, going, oh, all right, I got.
Yeah, man. I mean, so I mean, I think that like patriotism is fine, and I think there's a line there where it's like nationalism is what usually gets blurred with propaganda, and it
Mhm.
it turns you like into fighting for your state, as opposed to like being proud of where you live, which is what I consider patriotism. And maybe the definitions have changed over time.
Sure thing.
Um, but and like at the risk of like, I don't really want this show to ever turn into like another just like libertarian circle jerk
No,
where we
yeah.
just repeat the same fucking talking points all the time. But like, I mean, I think we all admire Ron Paul. The dude was fucking right about all this stuff. And like I said, like I kind of like preface that with like, I don't want this to just turn into another Ron Paul power hour, which like,
Never heard of that guy.
I know. It's one of those things like, I love Ron Paul so much. Like I can't stop talking about him most of the time, but at the same
Yeah.
time, we just need to, but he was right. Like this was it was, I think, just 2 years before 9/11, not even 2 years. I think it was him saying that just wait until this hits our shores. What are we going to do then?
Yeah.
And they're going to use that power against the people like they always do. And that's exactly what they did. And he was right.
Yeah.
We had, before 9/11 even came, I mean, me and you both know this, but we have been meddling in the Middle East for decades, and we had very stern and sharp warnings, like, "Hey, you need to stop fucking with stuff out here, or we're gonna come back at you." Um, you know, and it's really easy to, uh, you know, turn it and say, like, well, this is all our fault. But in a lot of cases, 9/11 kind of was our fault, for,
Mhm.
going over there and meddling so much. Um, but, you know, it's funny because it was only, like, I think 3 or 4 months after 9/11 they had Al Qaeda down to less than, it was enough people that could fit on one airplane, I think, is what they said. And essentially, because of our constant presence over there and bombing everyone's families and establishing democracy, now they have, I would guess, over 100,000
Yeah.
members.
Let me just throw a couple qualifiers so that they don't misquote
Sure.
us.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think you're saying that we provoked it. I would say it was provoked. It wasn't. We didn't deserve anything because we're not the government, and
Yes.
and so, but it was provoked. But that doesn't mean it was justified. And so
Sure.
I'll just add that little qualifier before they flip
Definitely.
you and me
I
and go
appreciate
like,
it.
Al Qaeda 1 and Al Qaeda 2 said ah la 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 over the YouTubes, and now we're all demonetized and censored and jail and stuff like that. So
Yes. Right. Right. Um, but I think that there's a lot of ways that 9/11 did wake people up, especially after, um, even after just the first decade of being over there, and the continuous military expansion. Um, Americans started kind of, like, changing their view on military interventionism, and now I do think that we're seeing, it really was like kind of like a polar shift. Like, it used to be like the moderate Democrats that were against the wars over there, and now we're seeing it kind of more on the right side of things. And I don't know if that's because there was a switch, or maybe the center line just shifted one direction and everyone's just extreme now. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. That second part seems interesting to me. What I think is like Jeff Dice. He says it way more eloquent, and I don't have to qualify that because I already said Jeff Dice. But he's like, it's kind of like nature's restoring back to its original order, which
Mhm.
was at the right. If you think of it as like the Russell Kirk stripe, not. I don't mean libertarian because that term didn't exist
Yeah,
back in the day, but there was a sensible. We don't want to do this right. That did believe that this was an abuse of power, that this would grow the Leviathan, and there was people on the right that were generally like not just like I don't think this is okay, but were generally turned off by this. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to pull a Scott Horton here and make people drink from a water fountain when they're
Mhm.
watching a show called Shut the Punk Up. So like I'm not going to do that. I'll give you the general outline and always just say go visit these guys if you want to just drink
Yeah.
from the fire hydrant. I'm not going to do that. So
Yeah. No, I hear that. And I mean, Scott Horton is definitely he's always been one of my go-tos for that much source of information. Um, but I think that it definitely has impacted all of us. And if you want to get the nitty-gritty details of everything that happened, really like a thought out process. Fool's Errand is a great book by Scott, and
yeah.
also Enough Already was fantastic. And I can't wait for his next book. I know he's still working on one, but
Yeah, we had a door knocking operation back in 2018. We were knocking doors for about 16 candidates um, in, yeah, back in 2018 for the primaries in New Hampshire. And I remember I would put it on for my whole team. We'd listen to Fool's Errand on audiobook in the mornings before meetings. So
nice.
that's what we were. That's the propaganda that I was playing for those guys back in the day. So it's been a while since that book's been out, dude.
Actually, I think you got name dropped on my show with Eric Brakey. Did you help door knock with Eric Brakey in Maine as well?
That's so fun. Yeah, I did. So my first door knocking gig was to just go out and knock doors for Breaky's. I want to say Senate race. He went out for Senate against Angus King, and
Mhm.
we had a team, and we did 100,000 doors in the dead of winter for Breaky. Was probably my first door knocking gig back in the day.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, I just had him on a few weeks ago, so you're kind of fresh on the mind. So I guess like you said, you've expanded to closer to 30 states now with
Yeah.
Defend the Guard.
Yep.
Um, are there any that are, I would say, your immediate priority to move into this year? Like, are you actively trying to find, like, how does that work? Like, do you find kind of more of like a decentralized group of people that are in each state to coordinate that? Or do you try to go out and recruit people to head this up?
It's a little bit. It's like you got to be a little bit of a detective, at least just for the initial part. There's several stages of a bill, um, but the initial part of just getting that intro is like, hey, do you know anybody? I know somebody. Hey, do you want to put me in contact? And so it's a lot of reaching out, seeing what they're about, giving them, the elevator pitch, and all that stuff about what it is that this bill's about, how I can help, all this stuff. But it's a lot of outreach, talking to state reps and sitting down with them. I wish it was more decentralized. Not not a whole lot of help so far on that avenue where people are just like, let me throw you this guy and let me throw you that guy.
Yeah.
That would be amazing because if people were doing that, that means that people would be reaching out to their state reps and getting feedback. And it's happened a handful of times, but I wouldn't say that that's the default position. I wish that's the day. This is where I
Um,
could find another job.
Right. Well, yeah, I was actually, I know I'm in New Hampshire right now, and uh, there's some great activists for Defending Guard up here. Obviously, Tom Mannion, like who was on the show,
Mhm.
some several other state reps, even on the left, kind of
Yeah,
got behind this. Yeah, Ellen
Ellen
Reed
Page.
and
Reed,
Jonah,
yeah,
I
she's in there.
believe, also did. We have the absolute like awesomest dude ever, Derek Prue as well, who's
Yeah,
just a workhorse.
hate that
Uh,
guy. Yeah.
um, but I was gonna have him surprise you on the show tonight and give him the link, and I totally spaced it. I've been so busy today. But it's interesting because New Hampshire actually does have a really good shot at being one of the first states to pass this.
Yeah.
We got it passed through the state house this last time, and then when it got to Senate, we didn't even get a roll call off of it.
No.
And what do you think that like states can do? I mean, there's been a couple states now that have passed it through at least one level of their legislation, correct? Because was it Utah that
Idaho.
did this? I can't remember who else.
That
Who
got
else?
it through. So Arizona, Idaho, and New Hampshire passed it through chamber.
Yeah. So and then it goes to the next level or whatever, and
Hmm.
but like what can I mean? Let's say I'm in New England. States, every state's completely different on how their legislative process works. It's all similar, but it's very different, especially in New Hampshire compared to everywhere else. But
Yeah.
um, people that are in like absolute hellholes, like Massachusetts, right?
Yeah.
Which is where I spend a lot of time. A lot of time. Obviously, very left leaning state. You have to hope that there's a lot of moderate Democrats that still live there that are anti war and they don't just drink the Kool Aid, right? But,
Yeah.
what can we do in places that are more, left leaning, but have maybe kind of lost their way to try to get this,
That's,
some attention brought to this?
dude, I'm gonna be honest with you. Move. If you're in Massachusetts or one of these blue states, run. Because I'll be perfectly honest. There's been a one. We've had co-sponsors, but there's only been one primary sponsor of this bill in its entire existence, and that was in Hawaii. His name
Wow.
his name was Dale Kobayashi, and
Okay.
he was the one guy that filed it, and then they ran him out of office the very next session. And he thought this was going to go swimmingly because Hawaii, turns out, was very Democrat, very very progressive. And so he put this forward, and it died a horrible death. And then they ran him out. And
Dang.
there's been a couple co-sponsors and even some votes. Like in New Hampshire, there was 22 Democrats that voted for it. The progressive, like Ellen Page or Reed, one of those.
It was Ellen Reed, yeah.
Ellen Reed, that's what it is. Ellen Reed and Jonah Wheeler and their caucus that voted for it, and that's great. But that is by far the most. Places like Montana, where it failed by 11 votes in the House, that was because the overwhelming part of the Democrats voted against it. 2 voted for it, and then afterwards immediately rescinded their vote because they got scolded by leadership for voting for this, because Democrats would cut off their nose to spite their face. So if you're living in a blue state and you're not watching the trends that are happening, there's less and less aspects of the left that are redeemable. If you're on the Jimmy Dore stripe of whatever's left of the left,
Yeah.
sure, I get it, but those aren't your politicians. Like,
Right.
the worst part about it is like, they say like, the best part about the left is that they're not liberals, and the best part about liberals is they're not the left. The Venn diagram of who gets into office in a blue state is almost like, that like hokey libertarian back in the day. They used to have like the, this is what we like about the left and this is what we like about the right. And they had a Venn diagram about all the stuff that was really cool about libertarians, because, hey, we're like this and we're like that, but we're not all the other things that you hate. Well, it's kind of similar but inverse. So it's like the vignette where they're all of the bad aspects of everything you hate about liberals and all the bad aspects of everything you hate about the far left.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they're just as communist, but also as milquetoast and weak as you can imagine.
Definitely, man. And so and like, it's not right in line with that question, but I did have one as well. Just in terms of like speaking to veterans, because this is something that is very sensitive to a lot of veterans when you're talking to them. A lot of them been through a lot of shit, and they might, especially like in New Hampshire, the biggest thing that's going on, like, oh, we're going to lose funding. Screw the fact that we're like creating more veterans every single day and people are dying. It's about the money. But like, what is your opinion? Because I think the best people to go out and actually talk to veterans is other veterans. I think that's the easiest way to do it. But what would you say to like a normie who wants to reach out to veterans? Should they even like?
I guess what I'll say is the argument from authority works, and I hate that it does, but it's just true. And the more you explain it to someone, it's kind of like a joke. The more it's going to bomb. Well, you don't understand. I'm not a veteran, but I'm telling you what is actually true, and it shouldn't lie on my, my ribbon sheet and all this stuff, because I'm just telling you what's good. So there's an aspect to that. That's 100% true. You can also just be a regular dude, and this is where I don't think that a lot of libertarians, which is probably the majority of the show, that watch this is they're just not that guy. Whereas, like, also, if you understand that you have a little bit of confidence and you're just the dude, you can also just have a conversation with someone, and it doesn't have to be an elevator pitch, and it doesn't have to be like you're selling someone. Where it's like, let's say you're just a regular dude that goes to the gym and has a conversation with his fellow countrymen. That could also work too. Does it work better when you have a veteran to walk in there? Yes. Is it worth not doing it until you find a veteran 6 years from now and then you start the process? No. So
yeah, it's really about just getting off your ass and going to do something, right? Like,
yeah, most of politics, it's just, you're going to screw it up. You might as well just get it over with. And then you're going to continue to screw it up until you don't screw it up. And then one day someone will offer you money because you figured out how to screw it up less than most people. But if you don't start that process and you just wait for that perfect thing and you never take that leap of faith, you just all you're doing is retarding your progress and the progress of whatever it is that you want to move forward.
So I guess tying this all into the organization, Bring Your Troops Home, or Bring Our Troops Home. So what's a good message to give to people, I guess, on the anniversary of 9/11, regarding the future of U.S. military invention and the work for Bring Our Troops Home?
let me try to break that down into two parts. What was the
Yeah,
first
sure.
part? It was so the first part was
Yeah, what's a good message to give to Americans on the anniversary of 9/11 regarding the future of uh, interventionism?
yeah, I'd say sympathy and understanding like why, you know what I mean? And understanding that for some, and the problem is that I don't want to say that it's an idol for people, but it's created idols, not the act itself, but because of that, a lot of people have idols, and you're
Yeah,
touching a lot of people's precious, and you should be aware of that. And you should also have the appropriate libertarians, like give me eyes. You should probably express the proper emotions when dealing with normal people who still, that day was horrible for them, and so the proper response in dealing with some of these people is empathy, is sympathy, and is just understanding. And that's how you should lead with a lot of this stuff. And you can be right about all of the consequences of 9/11 and all of the lead up to 9/11, and still just really understand that, dude, like there's a good chance that they had a cousin that worked at Twin Towers that died that day. You know what I mean?
yeah,
There's a handful of people that died in my town, um, that worked in the Twin Towers. My cousin was supposed to go to work that day. He wasn't there. He decided not to go to work that day, and then that all happened. So just try to lead with sympathy when it comes to this. And it doesn't mean that people don't develop idols from everything that came after that. Um, So it doesn't mean don't tell them the truth and don't give it to them good and hard, but maybe, in certain aspects, just
yeah.
try to
I mean,
try to
I
be
think
understanding.
that's something that we struggle with in the liberty movement in general. Because as soon as you take that red pill and you can't see it the other way, and you
Right.
think everyone else is wrong, you lose your ability to really relate to people a lot, and
Mhm.
you kind of like get desensitized, especially the more you rabbit hole into it and
Yeah.
really figure out how evil the system is. A lot of people don't know that, and they are just going through the motions of life and trying to make through. um but let's tie that in kind of to your work with Bring Our Troops Home. Like, you guys do a lot of really good stuff.
Mhm.
You're obviously focused on helping veterans by not creating more of them, which is great, and I know they get said a lot. But is that, would you say, part of your strategy with Bring Our Troops Home is to be able to go out and talk to people like normal people?
No, my job is not to really necessarily talk to the most amount of people or to educate people.
Mm,
I'm of a different persuasion. My whole thing is if I can bend politicians to my will, people will follow the law given to them. Rather, like we always assume that if we just educated everybody and then they just all of a sudden read Rothbard and I almost read Hayek. Well, read Hayek too, but read all of the guys and really got read up and then understood economics and understood history and then understood foreign policy, that all of a sudden that they would just get right and then everything would just go our way. And here's my evidence against that: the Thanksgiving dinner table. You educate your family, they
yeah,
hear you, and then they pull the trigger every single time, every election, for the people that you probably hate. So how's that education going? And that's in your own family. So I
yep,
don't I don't think that the strategy here is necessarily that you shouldn't educate because you don't know who's going to wake up.
right,
But my job is not that so much, because there's already people that do that. My job is to get the politicians, bend them to my will, or here's what I'd say: the good politicians file the bill, they fight for the bill, we back them up, and we defend them. Like, you have to be a warrior for the people that are going out there and taking arrows for you. For
mm,
the other ones that are stubborn, that would do it, but they're kind of hesitant, like they need a little WD-40. And so I come in with a little WD-40, and that's essentially legalized harassment, where I just do apply grassroots until we can just turn it a little bit. And then they go, oh, wow, like I really just like this. And then all of a sudden, that gets expressed back to the people that, yeah, no, I just love this thing and this thing's great and I've always been for it. And then the people adopt it as if it was always their idea. So my job is not necessarily in education or trying to get out to the masses. My job is to essentially funnel the masses in a direction that as close to legalized terrorism as you can get, which is just making politicians feel really, really, really uncomfortable, which is, I guess, just called politics,
Yeah.
which, and just making them bend the politicians to your will, and you'll find out how fast the people just get in lockstep. And that just happens to be true. And so that's what I consider my job, is to be a filter for the grassroots and to funnel it in a direction where it has an ouch factor, rather than, like, let's say I get 100 people and we all just get lawn signs and we stand on a highway and it just doesn't do anything. Nothing came of that. So that's
So
my job.
that's awesome. And is like, I know that the National Libertarian Party did just adopt Defend the Guard as an official strategy moving forward.
Mhm.
That's going to be something that we're pushing for. And what are some things that you would tell people who are hearing about Defend the Guard and probably know about Defend the Guard, but really don't know what to do? They don't know how to talk to people. They don't
Yeah.
know how to phone bank. They don't know how to knock doors and reach out. What would you? Where should they start?
Let me pause this, and then where should they start? And so let me write this down because I don't want to forget, but I do want to add like a sincere moment for anybody watching this that's like, I'm kind of a little retarded and I don't know what to do, and I've never focused on this stuff, and I've got a lot of political theory but I don't have experience, and I'm a little shy, and I'm clearly a little introverted because I'm watching this show. So if you got a touch of the tism or whatever it is, like, you know what I mean? What I would say is just reach out to me, and anybody that wants to do this, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. Um, there's no person that you have to call to then call me or something like that. You can have direct access if you have a thing, and I'm more than willing to help you out. And the Bring Our Troops Home does schools where for 20 some people will come, and we'll do a 9 to 5 class on grassroots activism and confrontational politics. But on the one-to-one level, if you're just trying to figure out what can I do to be effective, there's ways for me to take a call, for me to help you. There's group chats that we're a part of where we help each other and we do the small things so that we start learning what works. So that people, like I say, like, we got this filed in 30 states. We got to pass through several chambers this year. And if you saw the size of the group chat in this group, where probably 40%, 50% of them on a regular day where we show up to do phone banking and stuff, probably like 35 to 50 people max that show up to do the work. And there's about 70 people altogether that have helped put this bill forward. When you're thinking a bill that attacks the aspect, the leg of foreign policy, and focuses it in a decentralized manner where the states are reasserting their rights on matters of foreign policy, you'd say that's a pretty big thing. And when your opposition is the Pentagon, and then you look at your other, and who is the fighting force? Who are these elite, warriors, right? And you realize it's like the little giants. It's just, you know what I mean? Like, it's like these like 5-year-olds versus like an NFL team. It's like
Yeah.
70 guys in a group chat just going full tism, but they just don't, they know what they're doing, and they're focusing it in the right way, and they're learning how to do it. And so they're becoming more effective, and it actually works. So it's not stuff that's masturbatory in a sense where, you feel good, and it's not great because it's not that much fun, but it's effective, and the effective part is the fun part. And also, kind of sometimes when politicians cry on the phone or their assistants start crying, that's also fun. But you can always reach out to me, and I have no problem handing out my email, or anybody that wants to just, I guess, Twitter. I don't really check Twitter, but if you DM me, I'll answer back. I'm just not great with it, but I understand that people use it. So, but if you reach out to me, I will talk to you. And then if you're serious about doing this, you can always get added to the group chat. I would say there's a couple links: defendtheguard.us, bringourtroopshome.us, and there's defendtheguard.us/phone bank, so you can sign up to start doing some of this stuff. So you go, I don't feel confident. What do I do? Well, you just help us I'll train you over a Zoom call in the morning that takes about 15 minutes. You'll get added to the group chat. From there, you notice that there's tools and tips and things that we're doing and strategy and the conversations that people are having, and you start noticing wins, and that's how you start to slowly change um, where you're at from going from full-blown autismo who has so much potential but it's unrealized in the sense that it's you don't know what you're doing. So essentially you just burn up like a big fire full of passion but no
Mm,
direction. And so a lot of libertarians lack that. And there's some people that you couldn't be bothered to get them out of their mom's basement and put down the video games to actually go do stuff, but there is people that can be really effective and useful. And like I said, a group chat with 70 people will literally be the result of changing this country. And you're like, who is going to fight this leviathan of the Pentagon, of these generals here? Who is going to do this? Like, what kind of big, bold, beautiful warrior is going to show up? Like, where is my Gideon? And you realize, no, it's just 70 autists in a Telegram chat that are literally going to change this country. You can be a part of that too. And in fact, the more people, the sooner it'll come. So it's nothing. Nothing new, nothing revolutionary. We're just applying actual grassroots activism and confrontational politics to our model, and that just happens to work.
would you say that like with the more shift in like global politics lately, with obviously the Israel and Gaza conflicts, but then you have like the war in Ukraine that's been added on, and the continuously rising tensions with China, does
Yeah.
that affect your work with the organization? Do you think that that's like maybe kind of more of like I don't know. For me, like it kind of gets me like amped up to try to like make more happen, to try to like get
Yeah.
people back here as quick as possible. I mean, that's the whole point, is to bring the National Guard's troops home with Defend the Guard and eventually everybody. But
Right, right. So it's what's great about Defend the Guard is it's a Rorschach test where you can technically be a neocon that just might want to do this according to the Constitution, which would mean that Congress would have to, you know, put up a formal declaration of war, and then the National Guard could be sent into combat. Or you could be a complete dove or anti-war, or you could even technically be a Zimzer with pronouns and blue hair and not want war, and this is your bill too. Um, let's be real, for the majority of the people really moving this is somewhere between MAGA grandmas, small L's and big L's that are the
yeah,
conglomerate. So we shouldn't be deceived. It's not like, again, we got the blue hairs to go out there and be effective. You know, they're good at protesting. They're not good at mobilizing. Um,
right.
so that is the makeup of who it is. So I don't want to deny the people their rightful due, as it's been the people most receptive, the people most likely to get activated is small L's, big L's, and like MAGA grandmas. America first are the types that are most receptive to this. But it is for anybody. I don't know if that was the question, but
No, that's perfect. And like obviously we talked about, because with this right now, and this is very much so still in beginning stages. You guys been at this for a while, but like this is just the beginning.
yeah,
As things are moving along, as you can kind of see the political spectrum shift just a little bit in a more anti-war direction, at least uh, you know, from the public eye, at least what they say.
mhm,
Um, you know, I think that like it's hard to like how would you measure the success of everything? Because right now, I mean, I would see it as successful just to even get your bill heard in a lot
right,
of these states, just to get it on the table with some of these politicians and
yeah.
state
So
representatives.
so then let me be fair to your question. I guess could I sum it up and say, like, how do you measure the success of this bill? Is
Yeah,
that a
pretty much. Yeah. How do you
okay?
measure the success of your
Yeah.
progress?
Okay, so filing it is important, and I think that's great. I think a lot of nonprofits rely on just the fact that they filed it. A lot of nonprofits are kind of useless. There's multi-million dollar orgs that don't get anything done, but go back to their donors and say, "But you don't understand. hey, bro, like, Ben, listen, I got this filed in 30 states and we're doing our work, and we're just going to keep chugging along, and look, if you give us another $100,000, we're going to be able to move this over to 32 states, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to waste a lot of money, and it's going to be great. And they have millions of dollars, and they're not effective. Let's just be real, they're not effective.
Right.
Or they get some like nonsense where it's like, no, listen, we got a bill put forward that says that every veteran now is going to get a lollipop when he shows up to the VA. Isn't that cool? And you're like, wow, that kind of sounds like it's nonsense. Or hey, we're going to extend the Purple Heart Highway. We're not going to stop extending the amount of Purple Hearts. We're going to extend the Purple Heart Highway here in Texas. And you're like, wow, that sounds like bullshit. Um, they waste they they truly waste your money on that, and so they can use metrics to deceive you. I say 30 states is because it's true, and I say that it's successful because it moves forward. So the first time it was heard in, like, let's say your state of New Hampshire, is we had a person file it, didn't go anywhere. A person filed it again, didn't go anywhere. There was a little bit of some sort of like providence where people like Tom Mannion and Granger and Matt Santanastasso and Gerhard and these guys who were just champs, and Matt, Tom, and Mike really showed up, really did the work to try to figure this out, really whipped votes. They crafted their testimony, they learned about the issue, and then they went forward and they fought for it, which is different. And it moves forward. That is the purpose of this bill, is that it's not going backwards, it's going forward. And when we have where it's passed the Arizona Senate, and so here's what I mean by progress. It passed in New Hampshire. That is progress. It's moved forward. It got through the third largest chamber in the English-speaking world, behind Parliament and Congress. That's pretty dope. I'd consider that a win. In Arizona, we got it passed. It was voted for initially. Last year it passed the Arizona Senate. This year it passed the Arizona Senate with 16 Republican co-sponsors. Or it had 16. We had 15 co-sponsors. Wendy was the primary sponsor. And so we had 15 Republicans as co-sponsors, and Wendy was the primary Republican sponsor. In order to get a bill passed in the Arizona Senate, you need 16 votes. We had every Republican sign off on this bill and move it straight out of the Senate without. What are you going to do, Democrats? Nothing. In Idaho, it got moved through to the Senate too, and it almost, I believe, got somewhere around 2/3 vote where it moved forward, close to that. So this is what I mean by it moves forward. And so
it's all in steps, right? Like, so it's like, and it really does influence other states to see the states around them trying to move these policies, because like it really, until it makes the progress and makes it through one level, that's what gives it legitimacy, right?
Yeah.
So the more states adopt it, or maybe even amend it in some cases, I don't know how much of it gets amended, but like I would assume not really anything. But like seeing New Hampshire pass through the House, and Idaho and all these states through their senates and stuff, that is motivational to a lot of people. And I might be mistaken, but didn't the New Hampshire GOP actually like adopt Defend the Guard as part of their platform this last year?
Yeah. So New Hampshire, thanks to Mannion and a bunch of people that were there to help add it onto the party platform. But now Texas, Georgia, New Hampshire, Idaho, and Montana.
It's awesome.
And so I believe 6 states now have all added it to their party plank. So now I know it's a part of the LP, and that's great, but it's much more meaningful when it's a part of the GOP party platform, because that's a party that's in charge. And so that's not a dismissal of what the LP's done by adding it onto their party platform, but they're also not, they don't have power. So
right. Especially, like in predominantly just dominated red states, adopting that as part of their platform is huge.
Yeah. Like Georgia, Texas, Montana, Idaho. This isn't like, hippy dippy like California. This is, raw, red meat, red Texas,
Yeah. And, this is kind of like like a little side question here, but I do think that the media plays a big role in public perception of this. Um, and I would love to see more, like corporate media. I've always said corporate media is the enemy of the people, and that's a very common phrase.
Yeah.
But I think with the rise in alternative media, you're going to see more like this. And is there a concerted effort to get this heard and talked about with some of the bigger alternative media channels? And
Yeah.
you guys have a strategy there, or?
Yeah, like I'm for it. I just don't think about it too much. That's probably, I'm not the communications guy, so I don't lose sleep at night trying to think of like how. But for example, like um, Dan was on Tucker's show, and it just so happened to be Will Kane who was hosting it that night. But he was on Tucker Carlson explaining his bill, and Dan has been on Jimmy Dore explaining his bill. And people like it, and some people donate, and that helps because we're a grassroots org. We're not funded by just we have millions of dollars coming in. Like that would be nice, but that's not the case. So it does help to get that out, and it does bring people in to do that. And there's people that are passionate, and sometimes they're even willing to be useful, and that's crazy. So it's beneficial, but I think the bigger aspect of this really is that once it's rather than shooting it into the crowd, you focus your energy on putting it on that energy on the politicians, and some politicians are just great and they're champions and they're going to do what's great, like a Tom Mannion. Tom Mannion then turns to the crowd and says, "This is awesome," and people go, "Well, it's got to be true because the state rep said it." And then all of a sudden that comes from a position of authority. He makes his case. He makes his case to his colleagues as well. So it's not anything else, but it's more effective than, let's say, if we just it really is that the law becomes a tutor back to the people. And when the legislators tell the grassroots, tell their colleagues this is good, is because you focus. Now with Tom, you don't have to do stuff like that because he's just
Right.
mega based. We love him. um, but with some other people, is you focus energy on getting them to say ouch. And once they say ouch, they love this thing. And then once they say they love this thing, everybody who knows them all of a sudden loves this thing. And that's kind of how that works is um, put your energy to where it's most effective with what you have. So just understanding the resources. It would take a lot more resources to get the masses whip up into this, but rather if you focus it through the politician or through an elected leader or just anybody with influence, and then to get it to cast it back to the crowd just goes, yeah, I loved it, and somehow I feel like I've always loved it. And you're like, that's right, that's great. Yes, you did.
um, well, I think, like you said, this is all grassroots activism. And really, without people volunteering to do this type of, backstage work, I mean, nothing happens, right?
No.
So, going back into that, I definitely think people should reach out to you and learn how to phone bank. Like this is something that is useful and helpful to
Yeah.
do everything political. If you can't
Yeah.
text and phone bank, like that is like one of the backbones of political movement. So,
Yeah.
and obviously calling state reps and politicians, that is a huge part of it as well.
Yeah.
I think, people might get intimidated talking to uh, politicians, but like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, these are, and some of them are lizard people, but a lot of them are just like people, just like you,
Yeah. So
and
here's the best part is I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think I don't want to lose this thought. Is
yeah,
that politicians are not they're not filled with like complex thoughts or anything like this. They just it's kind of like they go to where there's least amount of pressure. So the way I just explain this to people is like, imagine this is your politician. The most part is the money comes this way. And so the money's coming this way, and so they go like this because they go to the path of least resistance. If money and influence and power and the Pentagon start pushing them, they bend this way. Well,
hmm
that's great. But if the grassroots start pushing back, they have to now start weighing the issues because, for example, the thing that they will still fear the most is a large group of angry voters because no matter how much the general threatens them or how much this, if they don't have that seat that they hold on, that's their precious, right? So that's the thing that they covet the most, is that precious. They want power, they want respectability, they want to be liked by these also empty people. But in order to do that, they have to hold on to power. The grassroots is the only one that can threaten that power. Now, these people will also make that promise, but they can't deliver in the same way that the grassroots will. That we'll take your votes. And then what? So it doesn't matter how righteous you are and how much the general likes you if you can't be sitting right here in that seat, Mr. Committee Chairman, if you vote against us. And that's where essentially whipping these guys. So we're not reinventing the wheel. All of this stuff is fairly simple. In fact, Ron Paul, with a lot of his races back in the day, is he just used to send people to classes like the ones that we teach. We're teaching essentially the same classes that a lot of the OG Ron Paulers had to sit through to learn how to be effective, rather than making lawn signs and waving it in the highway. That's great. It expresses support. I'm not knocking that. But if you want to be effective, you start to learn how to mobilize the grassroots. That's what it is. These people they're not your betters. What you'll find out really fast is politicians they're arrogant, but they're also dumb. And you're a lot smarter than most politicians. Most politicians outside of, Tom Mannion and a handful of people throughout the country are dog shit dumb. Just really, really, like, imagine you're like, you can't be that dumb. Dumber. That's how dumb most politicians are. They're charismatic, but they're also really, really dumb. And
we saw the debate yesterday, and if that was proof enough that they're all stupid.
Yeah. So I rest my case. Those people are wrestling for the top of the ticket. They're not like debating each other for like dog catcher. They're debating each other for like who gets to handle like the nuclear button. And so I rest my case. That's an excellent point. So if you're trying to deal with these people, you kind of just realize, and here's what I'll say, everything will come from a leap of faith. I'm telling you things that might make you feel like that's too much. I can't write I try to write down everything Diego said, and I missed a step, and somewhere between 3 and 4 and then 6 and 11, I missed a step. So I'm not really confident that I can move forward with guaranteeing that I will do grassroots. But once I read enough books on how to do this, and I've exhausted every way, and I've watched YouTube, and then 10 years goes down the line and you just never did it, and you realize you could have learned this from 3 or 4 days of phone banking with us, and you would have learned about the 5-column analysis. You would have learned how to mobilize other people, how to communicate with other people, how to focus on the issues, how to message those issues so that when you come together, hey, this message isn't really working. That's nonsense. I talked to her. She's lying to you. Tell her this. Okay, perfect. Well, listen, I just called you. I talked back to my friend, and she said you're lying. All of a sudden, this mobilization, these coming together, the communication, you're learning how to, like, one, get the message forward, be effective, be aggressive in the sense that it actually bends the politicians to your will rather than the default force, which is just money, influence, and all these people that we really, really hate. And you learn how to do this over the course of, let's say, we do a phone bank, and maybe we do 2 or 3 more, and all of a sudden you've got it, and now your pet project, you're able to do your own 5-column analysis. You're able to get your friends together. You realize that with a pizza and a couple sodas on a Saturday, you can bend these politicians to maybe get them to do something that you never thought you could. You can sit here and try to go over this podcast episode, whatever you call it, over and over and over again, write down everything that I said, and still never get it. There's a little bit of you that has to go, I just have to go and do it, and I will figure it out. And you will figure it out, because a lot of the people now that are running the Defend the Guard issue for LP National were the people that hopped into that group chat initially and had never done any of this. And some of those people now have led, so for Zoom trainings and all that stuff, people like Amy, people like Zeb, people like Liam, and all these guys have now led Zoom trainings, have led the calls, because I've just been like, here, you do it. And they've gone up there, they've crushed it, they've educated everybody, told them what they need to do, given them all the tools and resources they're going to need, and tell them what targets to hit. And they did that all by themselves. And I know for a fact that that's not necessarily tools that they had in their belt before they started. And so if you think like, oh man, Amy's really great and Liam's really cool, and I like all these guys, and just realize I'm telling you this because I'm just as retarded as everybody else, and I don't possess any super skills or anything like that. You just have to do it, and you learn how to do it, and you realize like, oh, it wasn't that hard. I just had to do it. Whereas you sit there and you get, analysis paralysis, and you just never end up doing it. Which is why I say it's a leap of faith. But then once you do it, you realize how to be effective, and no one can ever take that away from you. And here's what I'd say: if you get Defend the Guard passed in New Hampshire, if you were a part of that, or if you helped where someone, you saved someone's life through what you did, or you woke someone up, or someone's life was made a little bit easier because of what you did, no one will ever be able to take that away from you. And the people that show up to all these conventions and sit there and take pictures and all this stuff, they don't have anything on you, because the one person that goes out there and affects real change, not just shows up to galas or conventions and takes pictures behind the step and repeat and like, look, I'm effective. You're a loser. The people that are actually effective and go out there and make people's lives better and bring home people, like they bring people home, alive and not a box. Those people have done more than 99% of the people that you'll see sitting there, just whatever, like, I'm a this, you're a loser, shut up. The one person that sits there and makes phone banks a couple times in a couple months has more on you as an effective grassroots activist than 99% of the people you know. So that's my promise to the person that goes, I don't know if I should do this. You should do this. I'm way more retarded than anybody listening. You could do this.
Well, that is a great way to kind of wrap up the show. I think that's a great thing. Anyone can. And, I think that, I definitely appreciate your time coming on here. I just wanted to throw this up there too. We did have Derek stop by. He said, I love Diego.
Hey, I hate that
guy. But I guess we'll wrap it up. So tell everyone where they can find you on Twitter or on Facebook, how they can get in touch with you so that they can get involved.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't have anything to say on Twitter, but you can message me there. I forget what my handle's at, but maybe you can. It's like Diego something.
Yeah.
But there's bringourtroopshome.us. There is defendtheguard.us. And then if you want to sign up to phone bank, there's defendtheguard.us/phone bank. And it's pinned on my Twitter thing. So if you go to my Twitter thing, the first thing that's pinned there is how to sign up for a phone bank. If you message me, I will get back to you, and I can help you figure this all out. And if anything lands, if anything is just remember, politicians are really retarded, and you have a lot more potential than you've activated yet. You just don't know it yet. So that's my two promises. These guys are really underwhelming, and your potential is way bigger than you ever thought you could. So when I say these things like get moving, get going, stop being retarded, that's not out of hatred. That's out of compassion, because I realize that most of you aren't maximizing your human potential, and I think you can.
Dude, well, I appreciate your time. Thank you again for coming on, and I certainly encourage everyone to get on Bring Our Troops Home.us. It is? Okay. Yeah. Bring Our Troops Home.us. Defend the Guard's a huge thing as well. We should all be helping with that. But appreciate your time. I'll drop you backstage real quick, and I'll wrap up the show.
Sure.
And then we'll talk in a minute. All right, guys. Thanks again for watching. Sorry for the weird background. I am moving things around, and this is the only thing I could find before the show was Make America Emo Again. Not the background of choice, but it's important nonetheless. This weekend I don't have another show, but I will be back next Wednesday, and should be a fun time. All right, you guys have a good night, and we'll talk soon. Coming for the